Good afternoon, everybody. This is Will Levy. I'm joined here with Greg Byrne, and others will probably also join throughout the broadcast. This is a RAD live Q&A. We've haven't done these in a few months, but we're starting them up again. Today we'll be talking about post-closing completion certification that we announced last week over RAD Blast, as well as a new tool that we've developed, the RAD Minority Concentration Analysis tool. For those who participated in these live Q&As before, we have a standard way for you to get your questions asked during the broadcast or afterwards. You have to raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon in the webinar tool, and we will respond to your questions. You can also type them in. You can also send them in, or type them in if you're a little shy, and that's okay. And we'll just read it over the message. If there are any questions we don't get to during this webinar, we'll try to respond to you afterwards over email. Okay, so again, today we're going to talk about the post-closing completion certification. We'll talk about the RAD Minority Concentration Analysis tool, and we'll take Q&A. We're happy to take questions on these topics or anything else that you've got going on that you'd like us to respond to. Okay, so starting with post-closing completion certification, folks know the RAD notice requires owners to submit a completion certification documenting compliance with what we've all agreed would occur in the RAD conversion commitment, right? The RAD conversion commitment sets out the scope of work and other requirements of the conversion, and so the purpose of this is just to come back at the end when the work is done and for you to tell us, yes, it's been completed. We've developed a new page on the RAD resource desk for owners to enter the information. We're asking really around three key areas, and we've tried to limit the amounts that we're asking of you. So really just honed in on three areas. First, was the construction completed? Second was does it look like right of return was fully complied with? And then three, we request data related to Section 3. We've also, you'll see on the page itself, we've posted instructions on how to complete each field and troubleshooting issues. So this is just a screenshot of what it looks like on the resource desk. You see the new blue ribbon at the bottom, which is where you would go in and enter this information. And now we'll just walk through it right now. We're just going to go into the resource desk and show you exactly what it looks like and walk through a couple of fields. So at the top is just we created this dummy slide, but when you're actually logging in for your property, much of this information will likely be filled in. Starts off with just some basic owner info and contact info, which we've discovered that for some of the earlier transactions, we don't always have things like the owner email address or phone number. So we ask that you just fill that out if it's not complete, or correct anything if it's not correct. We'll auto-populate things like when the have effective date was, as well as when the work was supposed to be completed. And then we go down to the certifications. The way this is structured, the owner is always going to certify to the work being completed and describe, and there's a field for the owner to describe any discrepancies of, there were some items they weren't able to get to, or they found, but this is why it's not an issue, or to say that there were some cost overruns and this is how they addressed it, things of that nature. If the work exceeds $2,000 per unit, we ask for a third-party certification. The instructions go into detail on what kind of third party could provide that certification. We provide some pretty broad parameters there, so please review the instructions now. Then we ask for you to confirm that the initial deposit to the replacement reserve was made, that all liens have been released, And then we get to a couple questions on lead. Number 4 being whether the owner's evaluating and controlling lead-based paint hazards in accordance with the regs, as well as just a plain number of the number of units that were abated as part of the RAD conversion itself. So try to keep this very simple. So far, we've gotten a number of submissions, and they've looked pretty good, with just some questions around the edges. So we appreciate all those who've been able to provide that. We'll be sending, forgot to mention this, we'll be sending reminder emails to folks as their construction completion date is approaching or has passed. We've already started to send those out, but it's important for owners themselves to make sure that you're aware of this requirement and are coming into the resource desk to fill it out. The next area is on right of return, and here it's just a high-level list of questions. The first batch of questions, or the first 2 questions, try to ascertain just the total number of families who are eligible for the right of return, and that's anyone who's living there, starting at the CHAP, issued to the CHAP, and then anyone who moved in after that. And then we ask you to, of that total number, which is calculated in question 3, we ask you to tell us either did the family return or remain at the site, and if not, did they move out or were evicted just as part of the normal course of operations, or did they voluntarily accept an alternative housing option? In other words, they chose not to return because they accepted another option that was offered to them. So the last number, the last number there should be in most cases 0. That of all the residents who are eligible for right to return, the owner has provided an explanation by placing those households in one of those three buckets. Sometimes the math doesn't work out for one reason or another. There's a quirk in the deal, and so that's why we have that field there below for you to provide an explanation. The last part of this completion cert is data on Section 3. A lot of folks will be familiar with these questions. This is exactly the questions that housing authorities and participating jurisdictions answer for Section 3 hiring requirements through the Form 60002, and we've just replicated that here. Owners would be submitting Section 3 reports through the same module on the resource desk rather than going through SPEARS. SPEARS is the system that HUD has created for Section 3 reporting, but to both make it easier on owners so that they've got just one place to come back to provide reporting on when a property is completed. We've put it all together here on the resource desk, and so we then, once it's in here, we have our a system for transferring the data over to the Section 3 office. So that's it. Those are the 3 pieces of this completion cert. Based on what's submitted here, we'll be doing some follow-up with owners based on if there are any things that are unclear or incomplete, or that possibly raise flags. We'll also probably be doing some just randomized audits of certain agencies to dig in a little bit deeper in certain areas and to overall assess and manage risk. So that is the post-closing completion certification.
Hey, Will, can I start off with a question, and then there may be others who are online. So at the time that I'm converting, I, the PHA, typically own the project. But many times I'm changing the ownership, either because I'm creating a single purpose entity because I'm taking out debt, or I'm transferring it to another developer or TOA or anything like that. So in the very beginning of the certification above, when it's talking about the owner, which is not the PHA anymore, the owner certifies. So who's going in to make this? Is it the owners going into the resource test to enter this, or are we going back to the original PHA that is required to complete this information?
It's a good question. Thank you, Greg. So the owner is always completing the completion certifications. There are, as I said, some cases where we don't have the owner's contact info, so we've sent notification to the PHA, so the PHA can get us the owner information. But the owner is always the entity responsible for providing the certification. There also may be some areas where the owner needs to go back to the PHA to get some additional information, like how many people were there at the time of the CHAP, which some owners may not have access to. But the ultimate responsibility lies with the owner.
And does the owner have access to that page in the resource test?
Yes.
Thanks.
We'll pause here for other questions as well. Are there any hands up, by the way? Let's see. There we go. Okay, go to the written question. Here's one. Okay. Letitia, you're unmuted and on the air.
Okay, I have a question. I just wanted to, I may have missed the beginning when you talked about when this information has to be entered. So this is for when the RCC, the scope of work is finished. Nothing
Yes.
earlier than that?
Yeah, only when you're finally done with the work.
Okay, and what if the RCC includes, like we have an RCC where the work includes apartment renovations as well as common space, so they're not going to be done until like sometime late next year. So we have almost 2.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Yes, when all the work, whether to the units themselves or to the common space, all the work that was required in the RCC is completed, then you would complete the certification.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, thank you. Okay, Amber, you're unmuted as well.
Hi, thank you. I had a follow-up from the question that was just raised, but it seems like as well, it's not just construction completion, but maybe the cost certification process might need to be completed as well. So that's part one. And then part two, I had Housing Authority ask if the closing out of, including the 8609 process, was sort of encapsulated by this, or if it's strictly the work is done, we have cost cert, we can go in and complete this certification at this point.
So is the first question, let me see if I understand, Amber, is the first question, do you all, a lot of tax credit entities or lenders will require a cost certification, looking at the specific cost items of in the work. You're asking, is that also required in here?
Yeah, I think that one of the first early questions you showed us was the final cost amount.
Yep.
And so I think there is likely a delay between the actual day that construction is completed and the time that you will have that final cost number to be able to put into that certification up there.
Yes, right. So we, I believe what we've said is folks have 45 days from the completion of work to complete this process. And if for whatever reason the cost cert extends beyond then, which I don't think would be typical, I think you should just have a conversation with us and explain that.
Great, thank you. That's especially helpful for conversions that closed under the old form of the RCC that didn't sort of capture this 45-day period beyond the completion of work.
Yeah.
So that's helpful to know.
Yep. Thank you, Amber.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's see. There are a couple of written questions we'll go to before we go to the next part of the presentation. Okay. So there are a couple of questions people submitted on Section 3. One question says, what's adequate supporting documentation for Section 3 compliance? So you should take a look at the instructions that we've provided on this. Not being the experts on Section 3, we've generally redirected folks to the Section 3 mailbox, where they're really prompt in responding to inquiries and are very supportive in getting this stood up. So I'd direct those questions there. There's a question about whether there's a time frame when the work must be done. So the RCC should specify in all cases the period in which the work was expected to be completed. If for any reason that there were delays in getting started, as some PHAs owners have told us, you should let us know. And we want to make sure we're aware of any reasons why the work may not be occurring. It also affects your ability to get paid rehab assistance payments. So it's important for you to let us know if the work is not occurring within the time period that was set out in the RCC. The question, will this PowerPoint be provided to attendees? Yes, we will post this on our webpage in the resource desk. There's a question, due to delays in closing or repairs were completed prior to closing, do we still need to do the certification? So if the repairs were done prior to closing, it probably shouldn't have been on the RCC, in which case you wouldn't need to include it in the certification. Okay, let's move on to the second part of the presentation. Thank you for your questions and keep them coming. Second part is about the RAD minority concentration analysis tool. Before we dive into the tool itself, I want to provide some background. So as folks know, HUD conducts an upfront civil rights review whenever a RAD conversion involves new construction. The review essentially has two steps. One is assesses whether the area is minority concentrated, the area where a proposed site is minority concentrated. And then if the answer is yes, then the second step is if the area is minority concentrated, does it meet one of the exceptions for a building in an area that's minority concentrated? So the RAD minority concentration analysis tool we've developed to allow PHAs to quickly assess whether a proposed site for new construction is or may be in an area of minority concentration. We provide a little bit more context to that too. On the next slide, we've got a decision tree that we'll walk through. So if you're a PHA that is an owner that's identified a site for doing new construction under RAD, first question is, does the PHA identify the site as being minority concentrated? If you already know it's minority concentrated, then you can ignore the left side of the screen and go straight into submitting a justification for why the site meets one of the exceptions. But in many cases, it's the PHA doesn't think it is, or it's ambiguous, and so that's what the RAD minority concentration analysis tool. And the tool will tell you essentially one of three things. One, the tool will say that the site, it will show that the site is not minority concentrated because both the census tract in which the site is located, as well as the census tract plus the adjacent census tract in which the site is located, compared to the housing market area, is not minority concentrated. Doesn't trip the test. So if that occurs, when we'll show you the tool in a second. When that occurs, the tool tells you that, and you submit that to HUD, and HUD will confirm that the site is not in an area of minority concentration. The second option is that the tool shows that the site is not minority concentrated based on either the census tract, or what the tool allows you to do is draw an alternative geography, an alternative description of what the neighborhood or area is. If that's the case, but it still it doesn't fall into the first category, but it falls into the second category where it's not minority concentrated based on either the census tract or an alternative geography, then HUD review, then you can submit that to HUD, and HUD will review that to determine that the census tract or alternative geography is a reasonable definition, description of the neighborhood or area that the site will be proposed, or that the site will be located. And the third outcome of the tool could be that the census tract plus adjacent census tract, or the alternative geography, they're all minority concentrated, and that unambiguously this site is minority concentrated, in which case the owner developer should go straight to preparing their justification. Well, either the owner developer, they have two options then: find a different site, or prepare a justification for why the site would meet one of the exceptions for building in an area of minority concentration. Okay, so let's go into the tool to just show you what this looks like. So when you first go to the tool is hosted on the HUD user website. You show up with a map of the U.S., a partial map of the U.S., really before, you shouldn't start playing around with it. You should log in. You have to log in for its full functionality to work. So we've created our account, Dan. Okay, so now you're in, and you see a few more options listed on the left. Second thing you do is type in the address where you're proposing to build. Our address here, I think, is 110 Sherman Street in Salina, Kansas. If the Salina, Kansas Housing Authority is on the line, I'll apologize ahead of time. So here we are in Salina, Kansas. If you go on the left-hand bar, you'll see various tool options, and if you click Show Tracts, it will already show for every census tract whether that tract itself is minority concentrated relative to the housing market area. So right away you see, well, this site looks like it's not minority concentrated. A little over to the west, there's another tract that is, but to the north, to the east, there are other tracts that are also not minority concentrated. So a user could, at this point, say, okay, I'm going to save the project. Click on the left side, Save Project, and it'll pop up, and you'll give it a project name. You could give it a project address if you want. You hit Save, and you'll get an email in a few minutes with the output. But I want to show just a neat functionality of the tool where you might say, you might look at the census tract, not necessarily you know, in this, if this were the, what your area looked like, you might not need to do this, but you could, on the left-hand side, hit draw, and then draw a line from, that includes this census tract plus a few blocks into the northern census tract. All the way down there, and it will, and this is how you're proposing to HUD to define the neighborhood, the area that the site is located in. It'll ask you if you want to save, you'd say okay, and then you would, once you fill in this information, again, the project name, and hit save, it'll send you another output report. So let's now go to that output report and scroll down, and you'll see, okay, this is the address, it shows the census tract, and all the data, which formerly you had to hunt through census data for, is now here. It spits right out, showing the data for the housing market area, the census tract plus adjacent census tracts, and then in this case also the alternative geography that you came up with. If you scroll all the way to the bottom of this page, keep going. It asks a series of questions that determine whether or not which bucket this site falls in based on the information submitted. Either the census tract, and the first couple of questions say is the census tract compared to the HMA, the housing market area, minority concentrated. In this case, no. And there are questions on, is the census tract plus the adjacent census tract compared to the housing market area minority concentrated? In this case, no. So this site looks like a pretty strong candidate. Further down below, they'll answer the same questions for the alternative geography that, or maybe it's right there, that the user entered to determine that. So it essentially helps tell you whether you're in that first bucket, and there's a high level of confidence that the site is not minority concentrated, whether you're in the middle bucket where there might be some ambiguity, and so HUD wants to take a little closer look to make sure the site is not minority concentrated because the surrounding census tracts are combined with the site census tract altogether is minority concentrated. Or if these are all yes, it's time to either pick a new site or start working on the justification for why the site meets one of the exceptions. So that's the tool. Why don't we go to questions?
Go back to Dan, go back to where you first went to the map. So you said, early on, look at this map, the site to the west does not meet it. How did you jump to that conclusion? I didn't follow how you knew. Well, what is it that was shown? It's red.
Yeah.
So where's the code that says red is a minority? How'd you know that? I didn't know that.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's a good question. So the legend will tell you it's right. Thank you, Craig. It's not intuitive. You'll see on the legend that it tells you that census tract code shaded in red is minority concentrated. If you go into a denser city, you'll see it's more spotted. You'll see the pattern of minority concentration. But right, that's if you're looking at an area, it's that red that's going to tell you.
And let me just ask another one. So, if my census tract is the Salina project happened to be in the one where it's red coded now, and so that failed the test. And so now I'm going to look for an alternative geography, right? So depending on where that particular property is, I might try to grab the one immediately to the right. I presume PHAs will try to, see what works for them. Ultimately, what's the decision of what's the right alternative geography, right? What,
yep.
Any thoughts on that?
Sure. So as we're just showing right now, there's an alternative geography. Let's say your site was in that northeastern corner of that minority concentrated census tract. You might say, yeah, that's where it's located, but its neighborhood, it doesn't include all that area to the south. It's really more appropriate to say it's the neighborhood across that avenue that includes some non-minority concentrated areas. So the PHA has the right to propose that. We ask that the PHA, when it makes its submission to HUD, provide some justification for why that's the neighborhood. The RAD Civil Rights Notice goes into some of the factors that should be considered when thinking about what is a neighborhood. HUD will do its own review to look at that justification, that description of the neighborhood, to determine whether the boundaries the PHA is proposing is appropriate.
So Dan, just for the heck of it, the boundary you chose, let's see whether that meets the test. And you have to...
If you click OK, and we'll come to his email though.
Oh, you don't see it up here. You won't know. There's no way in this tool right now to know immediately.
Right.
You have to wait for the...
You have to get the email.
You have to get the email.
So join us for the next live Q&A. The results of this. All right. Any other questions from either in the room, those who joined us in the room, or on the air? Let's see if there are any questions, any hands raised. Okay. Shira?
I was just wondering, I am signed in and I tried doing this myself and I didn't see the pink shading for minority concentration. Do you know
on the left side, you have to click Show Tracts.
Okay, I mean, I've tried that. It doesn't seem to be working, but I can follow up separately.
Okay, let's follow up separately. And
okay.
Certainly if there are 15 more folks on the line who are also experiencing the same issue, let us know if there's some kind of systemic technical issue we're dealing with. But otherwise, sure, we'll follow up with you.
Great.
Thank you. It's a question of whether this tool is just used for new construction. So the site neighborhood standards minority concentration analysis is specific to new construction that occurs in RAD. So right now, it's for those submissions that are being made for new construction that this tool is really designed for. But you know what I meant to say also is I started out this presentation and when we went to the tool with a known address, saying, hey, we want to build here. Let's find out if it's minority concentrated. What we strongly encourage folks to do is to use this tool even earlier when you're planning on where you're going to build in the first place. I think it makes a lot of sense to use this tool to think about which areas should you be considering acquiring and building in. Where can I find this tool? The tool is located on the HUD user webpage, huduser.gov, and if you search RAD, you'll find it there. We've provided a link to it in the financing plan page, where you'll also find the template for submitting site neighborhood standards, new construction reviews alongside of it. I think we'll also, not yet there, but we'll also find a way to post it on the document library of the resource desk, so it'll be a link, not a document. Figure out some way to do that. see if there are any more questions. There are no more written questions. Any hands in the air? Okay, we are also accepting questions on other topics. Anything else folks want to talk about, ideally related to the RAD program? If you'd like to submit anything, either by raising your hand or by sending in a question, we're happy to talk. Okay, let's see. Any more questions before we head off to the long weekend? Another one from Shira. Hi, Shira.
Yep. When I was playing with this before, I noticed that you can click on a census tract and see some information comes up. So I was wondering if you could talk about when that would be useful to do.
Yeah, so as folks use the tool, you'll see there are probably some additional tweaks and modifications we make along the way. We are hopefully in the not too distant future, you'll see some of the information that comes out in the output tool automatically appear there in that pop-up, which will save a few minutes off of here and there. But the information that right now appears in the pop-up isn't immediately practical.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. Okay, we've got a question on a separate topic. I'll read it out loud. We are allowed to ask for an annual increase per OCAF by the operating cost adjustment factor. Presumably this is for a property that's converted already. Can we apply the 2018 OCAF for a January 2018 HAP renewal? Great question. So the OCAFs that HUD publishes in the Federal Register each fall and early winter, the Federal Register identifies an effective date, which I think this year for the 2018 OCAFs is February 11th. That means if your HAP contract falls on, has a January 1 or a February 1 HAP effective date, the anniversary date, then you would use the 2017 OCAF schedule to inflate your rents. Thank you for your question. Okay, we have another question. Speak about alternative geography, but sometimes HUD talks about an officially recognized revitalization area, which has strict requirements. Can you clarify? So the again, remember that the analysis is kind of has a two-step process. First, it's identifying the whether the site is in an area that's minority concentrated, and that's where we use this term alternative geography when the census tract, which is often a pretty good proxy for neighborhood, sometimes falls short. And then the second stage is when a site is determined to be in a minority concentrated area, whether it meets one of the exceptions. And one of the exceptions could be it's in a revitalizing area. So that's a distinct analysis from what we've talked about today. A revitalizing area determined by the city, because the city's designated an area to for investment probably won't align perfectly with what the best understanding of a site's neighborhood is. So they are certainly related concepts, but won't always overlap. Okay, we have another comment. Pretty cool, nice job. Thank you. Okay, I think that looks like all of the questions for today. Thank you very much for joining us on this Thursday afternoon. Please feel free to send us any follow-up questions you may have to rad@hud.gov. Also any feedback of whether this was a helpful venue to receive this information and have your questions answered and clarified. So thank you very much and have a good weekend.